You've probably seen them everywhere, in movies, at a street fair, maybe even on a friend's coffee table. I'm talking about tarot cards. You know, with all those wild images of skeletons and lovers and mysterious symbols. They've been around for centuries, but for most of us, they're still kind of shrouded in mystery. Well, today, we're going to pull back that curtain.
So, how in the world does a tarot reading actually work? I mean, is it some kind of real connection to the universe? Or is it more of a psychological tool, something for looking inward? Or is it all just a very, very clever trick? Today, we're going to dig into all three of those possibilities. Let's see what we find.
All right, first things first. Before we can even get into how it works, we need to know what it is. A tarot deck isn't just a random pile of spooky-looking pictures. It's actually this incredibly thought-out system that's been evolving for over 500 years. So, at its most basic level, a standard deck has 78 cards. The easiest way to think about it is like a book with two totally different sections. The first part is called the Major Arcana, and the second is the Minor Arcana. And trust me, they each play a very different role in how a story unfolds.
The Major Arcana. These are the heavy hitters. You've got 22 of them, and they represent the big, universal themes of life. You know, major lessons, big turning points. When one of these guys shows up in a reading, it's signaling something significant, from the brand new beginnings of the Fool to the total chaos of the Tower. Now here's where it gets really interesting. For all their mystical vibes today, tarot cards have a very down-to-earth and honestly pretty surprising origin story. It's definitely not what most people think.
That's right. They weren't invented for telling the future at all. They were actually created back in the 1400s as playing cards for Italian aristocrats. The game was called Triumphi, which means triumphs, and it was just a popular way to pass the time, long before anyone thought about using the cards to peek into what's next.
So how did we get from a parlor game to a psychic's table? Well, it took a few centuries. For a long, long time, they were just for games. Then, in the late 1700s, some French occultists started giving them mystical meanings. In 1861, a guy named Eliphas Levi really cemented their spiritual status. He's the one who came up with the terms we use today, Major and Minor Arcana. But the real game changer? That came in 1909 with the Rider-Waite-Smith deck. For the very first time, all 78 cards had full pictures, which made reading them way more intuitive for everybody.
And that brings us to the deck most people know today. Understanding that Rider-Waite-Smith revolution is the key to cracking the code of the other 56 cards, the Minor Arcana. See, while the Major Arcana is about life's huge themes, the Minor Arcana is all about the day-to-day stuff. And just like the majors, they have a really clear logical system behind them, based on the 4 classical elements.
And this table just lays it all out so clearly. The Minor Arcana is split into 4 suits. You have wands, which are linked to fire. That's all about your energy, your passion, your drive. Then there are cups, tied to water, which deal with emotions, feelings, and relationships. Swords are connected to air, the realm of your thoughts, ideas, and challenges. And finally, you've got pentacles, which are linked to earth. That's the real, tangible stuff, like your job, your money, and your home.
Okay, so now we know what the cards are and where they came from, which means we can finally circle back to that big question. How does a reading actually work? Let's break down those 3 main philosophies.
The first perspective is the one most people think of when they hear tarot. It's the idea that the cards are a spiritual tool. This view says a reading is a way to connect with the universe, with destiny, or with some kind of higher intelligence to get some guidance.
But, this doesn't automatically mean your fate is set in stone. A lot of readers see life as really fluid. They believe that even if some big life events are meant to be, we still have free will. So in this view, tarot isn't predicting some future you can't change. It's more like a wise friend giving you advice on how to best handle the road you're on.
All right, so the second perspective kind of flips the script. It moves away from anything supernatural and dives right into psychology. This theory says that tarot cards don't work by tapping into some force out there. They work by tapping into what's already inside our own subconscious mind.
I just love this quote I saw from a Reddit user talking about this. It's a mirror, not a microscope. Think about it. A microscope is for looking at something external, something outside of you. But a mirror, it just reflects what's already there. And that is the heart of this psychological view. The cards are just showing you what's already inside of you.
So how does this mirror actually work? Well, the images on the cards, these universal symbols, they act as prompts. They let us project our own feelings and thoughts onto them, kind of bypassing our brain's usual defenses.
So a reading becomes this incredible way to have a structured conversation with yourself, bringing out truths you kind of knew deep down but maybe hadn't really looked at yet.
And that brings us to our third perspective. What if the so-called magic has nothing to do with the cards and nothing to do with your subconscious, but everything to do with the person reading them? This, right here, is the skeptical view.
This whole idea is built on a technique called cold reading. It's basically a whole toolbox of skills that performers and mentalists use to create this powerful illusion that they know all these things about you. It takes zero psychic ability, just really, really sharp observation skills.
Here are a couple of the classics. First, you've got shotgunning. This is where a reader just throws out a ton of vague statements waiting for something to stick, like, I'm sensing a connection to a father figure with a heart issue. Well, heart disease is super common, and father figure could be anyone. Then there are Barnum statements. These are phrases that feel so personal but really apply to almost everybody. Things like, you have a box of old unsorted photos somewhere in your house. I mean, who doesn't?
So we've got three totally different explanations: divine spiritual guidance, deep psychological reflection, and a really clever performance. But do they have to be totally separate, or could the truth be somewhere in the middle?
You know, maybe the power of a reading doesn't come from just one place. Maybe it's born in that dynamic moment of interaction. You've got the rich symbols on the cards, the reader's interpretation, and the deeply personal meaning that you, the person asking the question, bring to the table. So whether you think it's divine, psychological, or just a performance, the value is created right there in that exchange.
In the end, it seems like focusing on whether tarot is real or not kind of misses the point. Maybe the ultimate question isn't really about predicting the future, but about perception. It's not so much what do the cards say, but more like what do they help us hear in ourselves? And that's a question only you can answer. Thanks for joining me.